It's a surreal scene in the U.S., the army on the streets, protests across states, and Trump's birthday. Let's talk to Uriel Epstein, executive director of the Renew Democracy Initiative, about the Israel-Iran confrontation, possible worst-case scenarios, and more. Uriel, hello, good to see you. Hello. Uriel, President Donald Trump is celebrating his 79th birthday. A massive military parade featuring soldiers and equipment is taking place in Washington today. The pompous celebration is unfolding against the backdrop of a violent crackdown on riots in Los Angeles, where protests against anti-immigration raids have erupted. This contrast doesn't seem coincidental. What do you know at this point? Why is Trump's parade seen by many Americans as something surreal, and what's going on with the protests? There's a cultural issue here. There is no tradition of army parades in America. It just doesn't happen. In Europe, for example, in France, parades are held regularly, but in the United States, this practice is historically a thing of the past, and such a culture simply does not exist here. Donald Trump, however, loves it all. I remember during his first term, he went to France and saw a parade there, I think on the Champs-Élysées, and he loved it so much. To him, to his instincts, such parades symbolize power, demonstrate how he wants to appear powerful. That's how powerful the country is from his point of view, and that's why he wants to hold such parades. But from the point of view of the average American, first of all, this is not an expensive event, at least $45 million. Secondly, I live in Washington, D.C., right where the parade will be held, literally a kilometer from my house. Everything is blocked off, the whole city is paralyzed, the airport is closed, and so on. It's just inconvenient. But the most important problem is that Trump is making himself look almost like a king, like a dictator. Yes, on the one hand, he won the election democratically. Honestly, there's no question about it.
Чуть ли не как король, как диктатор. Это опять, с одной стороны, да, конечно, он выиграл демократически, он честно выиграл выборы, вопросов нет.
When you look at things like this parade, or the fact that he's sending the army to Los Angeles to California, it's absolutely abnormal. He sent an entire battalion despite the fact that the army is not authorized to do police duties on U.S. soil. It's not the police, it's the army, and in order to use it domestically, Trump would have to formally enact what's called the Insurrection Act. That is, declare that there's an insurrection or something like that going on, and that he has no choice but to use the army on American soil.
Сделал то, что называется Insurrection Act, где он сказал, что все, там есть какой-то coup d'état или что-то такое, вот он должен, у него выбора нет, он вынужден использовать армию на американской территории.
Without that, he has no right to do it, and he hasn't officially announced anything yet. The fact that all of this is happening at the same time is telling. On the one hand, he sends the army to California, where it performs a completely incomprehensible function. And on the other hand, there is a parade in Washington with tanks, airplanes, missiles, and other equipment. The very coincidence of these events is a reflection of how Trump sees himself and how he perceives the role of the army in American society.
Опять, это все, так как это все совпадает, так как это все вместе, это показатель. Это показатель так, как Трамп о себе думает и как он думает о роли армии в американском society, в американской общине.
Uriel, you said that Trump thus perceives himself as a king or a dictator. And just in opposition to his rule, citizens of the United States are preparing a rally in the coming days with the eloquent title, No Kings. It is to take place across the country on Saturday, and perhaps something is already happening. Speaking of protests, what is happening at the moment in different states of America, and what can it lead to?
Сейчас, что происходит в разных штатах в Америке и к чему это может привести?
That's a good question, and we really don't know exactly how these protests will unfold. If you look at the situation in California, it started with protests in Los Angeles against Trump's policy of deporting immigrants. He's been arresting immigrants, which include people with no legal status as well as those who are in the country perfectly legally. Some of them he just doesn't like for whatever reason, said something wrong, performed in some way. The argument arises that immigrants, even those who are in the U.S. with a visa, don't have the same free speech rights as I do, for example, because I am a U.S. citizen. From a constitutional standpoint, this raises serious questions.
Те, которые в Америке там с визой или так далее, у них нету того же свободного слова, как есть там, например, у меня, так как я американский гражданин. Это с конституционной точки зрения совсем непонятно.
I think this is completely untrue. Freedom of speech in America is absolute, and immigrants, even those here on a visa, have every right to express their views. That's the first thing. As for Trump's desire to remove these migrants, that is what the protests that have started are related to. Some of them were completely peaceful. People organized, spoke out, had every right to do so. But of course, there were some less disciplined participants who started throwing rocks, burned about 5 cars, and attacked 23 stores, not burned, but looted, taking everything they could. This is certainly a problem, and it needs to be stopped.
Они сожгли 5 машин, плюс или минус, и 23 здания, 23 магазина. Вот 23 магазина они не сожгли, они просто атаковали, чтобы, украсть, что они могли. И это, конечно, проблема. Это абсолютно надо это все остановить.
In California, Governor Gavin Newsom has deployed police to stop the riots, and the state does have a lot of police, about 20,000. Donald Trump saw this as an opportunity to show how much control he has over the situation and to show off his army. And it's important to realize that for him, this army is not just the U.S. military, but his own troops. He wants to put it on display and show the country that he can act and control what is going on. That was the first step. Now, when we look at the situation in California, we need to understand the different players here. First, there is the governor and the police who report to him. Second, there is the National Guard.
И теперь, когда мы смотрим на Калифорнию, тут надо немножко понять тонкости, какие тут разные актеры. Значит, первое, тут есть губернатор и полиция. Это понятно. Полиция отвечает губернатору. Потом тут есть Росгвардия, National Guard.
It's a little more complicated than that. The National Guard can report to the governor, but it can also report to the president. Donald Trump has taken control of the Guard, saying it now reports to him, and plans to use about 2,000 soldiers to quell protests. The court has already issued a statement that this is illegal, and a trial is underway to determine who should control the National Guard, the president or the governor of California. There is another organization, ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which is responsible for deporting illegal immigrants and securing U.S. borders. It reports directly to the president, and Trump can use it at his discretion. As we can see, ICE's actions are much more aggressive than the police or even National Guard soldiers, because they are a completely different type of people with different rules.
Теперь они отвечают президенту. И Дональд Трамп их может использовать, в общем, так, как он хочет. И мы это как раз и видим, что они намного более агрессивные, чем, например, полицейские или даже солдаты Росгвардии, потому что они это совсем другие люди, там другие правила.
The latest force is the U.S. Army. Donald Trump has sent a battalion of Marines there, just over 700 soldiers. They have arrived in California but are not authorized to perform any function other than standing around looking serious, guarding federal buildings. All of this symbolically shows how Trump is trying to maintain his power and demonstrates that it is pointless to go against him. People are responding with protests with the slogan "No to Kings" that will take place across the country. These protests are against Trump's centralized power and his attempts to concentrate too much power in his hands.
Теперь люди на это реагируют, там протесты, что нету королей, эти протесты будут по всей стране, и опять идея в том, что эти протесты это против центральной власти Дональд Трамп, американского президента, что американский президент не должен иметь такую власть, как Дональд Трамп хочет взять себе.
The last important point from a strategic point of view is how these protests will be organized. If a few 100,000 people come out and the protests are peaceful, it will be an important victory for the opposition to Donald Trump. But if violence, fights, or other disturbances break out, It will give Trump an excuse to use his power again to crack down on protesters, even if the local police could have handled it themselves. Such an excuse would allow him to bring in the army and change public opinion because there is plenty of evidence that Americans dislike anarchy as much as anyone, but especially dislike it when protests turn into chaos and violence.
Этих людей, несмотря на то, что, может быть, даже локальная полиция имела бы полное право и полная возможность это сама сделать, так это даст ему повод использовать армию. И номер два, это изменит публичное мнение. Тут есть полно доказательств, что американский народ не любит анархию. Никто не любит анархию, но что мы не любим тогда, когда эти протесты превращаются во что-то другое.
It is important for Democrats to realize that as soon as someone starts flipping or setting cars on fire, they should immediately condemn such actions and speak out against those who break the law. I hope Democratic leaders will do just that, support protests on the one hand and condemn those who don't follow the rules, attack stores, people, or police officers on the other. And another very important point is the use of symbols. The protests in California made a mistake because there were hardly any American flags visible.
Атаковать даже тех, которые не следят за американским, которые не протестуют по правилам, которые атакуют магазины, которые атакуют других людей, которые атакуют полицейских. И последняя вещь, и это тоже очень важно, это как они используют символы. Вот эти протесты в Калифорнии, ошибку, которую они делают, что там я почти американских флагов не видел.
There are many Mexican flags and other symbols out there, but to change the public's mind in the United States, people need to use American flags and symbols of patriotism to show that they are not against America or even the government, but are fighting for their rights as American citizens. They can combine American flags with Mexican flags. I remember when we organized protests in support of Ukraine, we never just had Ukrainian flags, always together with American flags, because the argument was that supporting Ukraine is also in the interests of the United States. These are our common interests, and as an American patriot, I believe that this is how we should act.
Мы же никогда не имели только украинские флаги. Это всегда были украинские флаги вместе с американскими флагами. Потому что аргумент был в том, что это не только в интересах Украины, чтобы Америка вам помогала. Это в наших собственных интересах, чтобы мы вам помогали. Вот это я, как американский патриот, считаю то, что мы должны делать вот А, Б и С.
First of all, Uriel, thank you so much for your support of Ukraine. Dear friends, you can write in the comments your thoughts on how you feel about the protests in response to President Trump's congratulations and how you think events will unfold. We read everything, and we really appreciate your activity. Uriel, to Trump's other statements, the U.S. president said that Iran's nuclear program has suffered a devastating blow from Israel, and it is now unknown whether it still exists. According to Trump, no one knows what state it is in now. How will this strike affect the situation, and how much more escalation will there be in the Middle East? How do you see the situation now and in the coming weeks?
Интенсивно будет эскалироваться ситуация на Ближнем Востоке. Как вы видите ситуацию сейчас и в ближайшие недели?
They destroyed all the key leadership of the Iranian army, intelligence and security, which changed the situation dramatically. I believe there is now a complete realignment in the Middle East. Israel did the whole world a huge favor by destroying the Iranian leadership. Interestingly, Israel had spies in Iran itself who knew exactly who, where, and when. In the first strikes on Iranian positions, Israel knew that all the key leaders from the military and intelligence would gather in one specific bunker. After the first strikes, when they gathered there, Israel struck the bunker and destroyed them all.
У Израиля были шпионы в самом Иране, которые вот четко знали, кто, где, когда будет. И, значит, при первых ударах по иранским позициям, и Израиль знал, что все иранские ключевые лидеры вот из армии, из разведки и так далее, что они будут встречаться вот в каком-то специфическом бункере. Значит, они сделали первые удары. Потом, когда все эти люди встретились в этом бункере, Израиль ударил по этому бункеру и убил их всех.
This included the leader of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the head of Iranian intelligence, and the part of the Iranian army in charge of missiles. At this point, Iran had missiles ready to be fired against Israel, but there was no one to give the order. The missiles remained in position, giving Israel time to strike them. Iran failed to respond as expected. Everyone thought there would be several hundred ballistic missiles, and in the first 24 hours they only fired about 100 drones, which Israel easily shot down. Now Iran has already managed to launch several ballistic missiles, killing 3 Israelis and injuring about 150.
Все думали, что Иран будет посылать несколько сотен этих баллистических ракет, а когда в реальности они в первые 24 часа все, что они сумели сделать, это 100 дронов, которые Израиль сбил без проблем. Теперь на сегодняшний день Иран сумел больше сделать. Иран таки наконец-то сумел послать какие-то баллистические ракеты, и они убили пока 3 израильтян и ранили 150.
This is, of course, a tragedy. There is a clear difference here. Israel is hitting the military leaders of the Iranian army, while Iran is hitting Israeli civilians because they lack the ability to effectively attack the Israeli army. They lack the necessary intelligence and accurate data. Again, we see the contrast between the two countries. Israel has not yet touched Iran's political leadership. As for further developments, I don't think this will escalate into a major war in the Middle East. Thanks to Israel's successes at the start, Iran does not have the ability to organize itself quickly, and it now looks weak in the region. So it is unlikely that many people are willing to cooperate with Iran now.
Идти вперед. Первое, я не думаю, что это будет огромная война на Ближнем Востоке. Из-за израильского успеха в самом начале у Ирана не будет возможности организоваться, и они теперь выглядят слабыми везде. И значит, я не думаю, что там есть очень много людей, которые готовы сейчас сотрудничать с Ираном.
Moreover, this comes after Israel almost destroyed Hezbollah in Lebanon, after the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, and after Hamas as an organization almost ceased to exist in Gaza. Without these allies, Iran has significantly less influence in the Middle East, so I don't think there will be a major war. The last important point is what will happen in Iran itself in the coming weeks. On the one hand, the people may organize against Israel, against the West, and in defense of the regime, but there's a good chance the opposite will be true. I've talked to quite a few Iranian dissidents, and they say that the regime is not very popular inside the country. Let's not forget that this is a dictatorship, a religious dictatorship, where women have no rights, and that has a strong influence on public opinion. So there is a serious possibility that the Iranian people will realize a unique opportunity to change their leaders.
Я имею дело не с немало иранскими диссидентами. И вот то, что они мне говорят, этот режим, он не очень популярный в самом Иране. Давай не забывать, что это диктатура, это религиозная диктатура, где у женщин нету никаких прав. И это, опять же, это влияет на публичное мнение. И значит, тут есть серьезная возможность, что иранский народ поймет, что у них есть уникальная возможность изменить их лидеров.
This is an opportunity that hasn't come up since '79, since the Iranian Revolution. If there are key leaders there who are ready to take responsibility, maybe we will see serious changes not only in Iran itself, but because Iran is the main negative actor in the Middle East, it can affect the whole situation in the region.
Какую-то ответственность, мы, может быть, увидим серьезные изменения. Не только в самом Иране, но, может быть, и так как Иран — это самый главный негативный актер на Ближнем Востоке, мы, может быть, увидим разницу и по всему Ближнему Востоку.
Uriel, on the implications for Ukraine, I will quote one thought. Valery Chali, a diplomat and Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S. in 2015-2019, said that in the short term, events in the Middle East will not affect Ukraine much, and it is important for us that Russia loses money. This could happen if oil prices fall, and in this sense, it is important whether Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, through which about 20% of the world's oil passes. If that happens, oil prices will rise sharply. However, the question is how long this will last and what the impact will be going forward.
Если это произойдет, то цены на нефть полетят вверх, однако насколько это долго может продлиться и как это может и на что повлиять также.
The first thing, oil prices went up, of course, but not astronomically, not in the way that many people expected. The last time I looked at prices was about 24 hours ago, and they were up somewhere around 13%. Maybe they've gone up further now, maybe not, but the fact that they haven't skyrocketed dramatically is an indicator. I don't think Iran will have the ability to close the Strait of Hormuz. It seems unlikely to me. There are two opposing currents here that are important to you. On the one hand, oil prices. The question is not whether the price of oil will go up, but how much it will go up.
Я просто мне не очень верится, что он сумеет это даже сделать. Но тут есть два противоположных течения, вот, которые важны для вас. С одной стороны, это цены нефти. И вопрос не пойдет цена нефти наверх. Цена нефти пойдет наверх.
The question here is not whether there is an impact, but how strong it will be. Whether it will be 15% or 50% growth, it will certainly have an impact on Russia's economy. On the other hand, Iran is one of Russia's two key allies and has been transferring drones and other military equipment. I have no doubt that you have heard those Shaheds flying around your skies. Since Iran will soon, I think, not have the ability to continue to transfer such equipment to Russia, we will see a positive reaction. This will be better for you, as Russia will lose one of its two key allies. The price of oil won't stay high for long. It's a temporary problem. The price rise will last a few weeks or months. Losing an Iranian ally is not a temporary problem for Russia, but a permanent one.
Это будет лучше, в общем-то, для вас, где Россия потеряет один из их двух ключевых союзников. И цена нефти не будет высоковечная. Вот это будет, я думаю, временная проблема. Цена нефти пойдет наверх, на несколько недель, может быть, на несколько месяцев. Но зато потеря иранского союзника для России это не будет временная проблема, это будет вечная проблема.
That's it. It's over. Iran is withdrawing from this war. Iran will not be able to help Russia in the war against you. I think that from this point of view, what is happening now, maybe not immediately, but within a few months will be a positive and important event for you.
То, что сейчас там случается, это будет для вас, может быть, не в течение следующих нескольких недель, но точно в течение следующих нескольких месяцев это будет позитивная вещь.
Uriel, another painful issue for Ukraine is armaments. Ukraine may find itself in a more competitive market of arms recipients. If the United States were to choose whether to provide military aid to Ukraine or Israel, it would probably not be Kiev that would get the advantage. We have already seen this in the arms issue. How do you assess the situation?
В принципе, мы сейчас это наблюдаем, и как вопрос с оружием, что с этим?
You need completely different kinds of weapons for this war. Israel, for one thing, has more advanced weapons like the F-35, which you don't have. And you don't have enough F-16s, unfortunately. Israel hardly uses F-16s anymore, especially for attacks on Iran. What you care most about now is artillery and anti-missile systems to shoot down Russian missiles and drones when they attack Kiev. It's not just Patriots, which are the most expensive and powerful systems, but other simpler anti-aircraft missiles that are not Patriots but can shoot down ballistic missiles.
Чтобы сбивать русские ракеты и дроны тогда, когда они атакуют Киев. И не только Патриоты. Патриоты — это, конечно, самые дорогие, самые большие. Вам нужны и другие тоже антивоздушные ракеты, которые более простые, которые, это Патриот, это чтобы сбивать там баллистические эти ракеты.
You need weapons to shoot down drones and other such things. That's more important than Israel. I have no doubt that America will help with missiles and other weapons, but Israel already has a large ammunition stockpile. What America gives Israel and the weapons they give us are different weapons, and what you need is different from what Israel and America get. Your problem with America is not whether they will completely change their attitude towards Israel and turn their back on you, it's that Donald Trump has already turned his back on Ukraine.
Это не те же самые оружия, которые вам нужны от Америки. Значит, ваша проблема с Америкой это не в том, что вот будет ли Америка просто абсолютно переворачивать свою, то, что они делают к Израилю, и отвернуться, и будут ли они отворачиваться от вас. Проблема в том, что Дональд Трамп и так отворачивался от Украины.
I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, he made the point again that he doesn't like what Putin is doing, but he also doesn't like what Ukraine is doing. From his point of view, he looks at Russia and Ukraine as two enemies of each other. but he considers them more or less the same. This shows his worldview, which is very dangerous for the free world. What does this mean? First of all, America is still continuing to give you weapons under the treaties signed under Biden. This is very important. It hasn't stopped even under Trump. There's no guarantee that it will last forever, but for now it continues, and I think it will last at least 3 months.
Это очень важно, это не остановилось, даже при Трампе. Нет никаких гарантий, что это будет навечно продолжаться, но пока это продолжается, и я так думаю, что это будет продолжаться не меньше 3 месяцев.
Maybe even 6 months. And then after 6 months, the key issues begin and everything will depend on Europe. If Europe helps you with money, with weapons, and so on, you will still be able to buy those weapons from America. I don't think Donald Trump will be able to refuse that you're just going to buy weapons rather than demand them for free. That's likely to change the administration's attitude. Even though Vice President J.D. Vance has spoken out against even selling you these weapons, there is a conflict, but I think the aid will continue. What Israel has done against Iran will not change the American position on Ukraine.
И это, я думаю, поменяет так, как эта администрация к этому относится. Несмотря на то, что вице-президент Джей Ди Ванс, в общем-то, высказался против даже продачи вам этих оружий. Значит, тут есть конфликты, но я так считаю, что это будет продолжаться. И что то, что Израиль сделал против Ирана, это не изменит американскую позицию к Украине.
It will be the same as last week, or maybe there is a chance that the situation will improve. My organization, Democracy Initiative, links Ukraine's position with Israel's because we see that both are fighting against dictators and terrorism. Republicans need to realize that if they want to support Israel, they need to support you. The fact that Israel has destroyed a lot of Iran's army leadership weakens the alliance of dictators. Donald Trump respects the strong. And since this weakens Putin, Russia, and other dictators, there is a chance that America may change its stance and Donald Trump will stop being so positive about Vladimir Putin.
И то, что Израиль сумел уничтожить вот просто настолько много из армейских сил Ирана, армейского лидерства Ирана, это услабляет вот этот союз диктаторов. И Дональд Трамп уважает тех, которые сильные. Значит, так как это услабляет Путина, это услабляет Россию и вот всех этих других диктаторов, я думаю, что есть шанс, что Америка тоже, может быть, будет изменять немножко нашу позицию, где Дональд Трамп не будет столь позитивно относиться к Владимиру Путину.
Uriel, lastly, a question about the relationship between Putin and Trump, because the Russians are likely to offer their mediation services. Could terrorist dictator Vladimir Putin agree to help Donald Trump resolve the Iran issue? It may be happening now, and he may get carte blanche in Ukraine for doing so. No, it doesn't. He's going to try to do that, and Donald Trump has also said that Russia may be able to do something to help. But other Republican leaders still aren't willing to stray that far from American principles, because American principles are principles of freedom. We can't go to a dictator and say, solve our problems and we'll let you attack a democratic country. Even among Republicans, they're not willing to do that.
И вот мы будем вам позволять атаковать демократическую страну. Все-таки даже среди республиканцев они не готовы на это.
They're willing to support Donald Trump on almost anything. But I've seen several leaders in the Senate and House among Republicans speak out and say that Putin should not be allowed to solve our problem with Iran and that mutual aid with Ukraine is unrealistic. Moreover, thanks to the latest attacks, we don't need Russian help. I think Iran will be forced to change its position over the next few weeks. The first possibility is that something will happen from within, and Iranian dissidents will be able to organize themselves and oppose the weakened regime. Now, this is the number one possibility. I don't know what the probability is, maybe 10 to 15%, but not zero. The second possibility, which seems more likely, is Iran will be forced to change what they've always said, that they have an obligation to produce nuclear weapons. That will also change because they have lost almost all of their army leadership, as well as several hundred missiles. Let me remind you that Iran had about 2,000 ballistic missiles in total, and they have already lost several hundred of them. I think this will change very soon, and even Putin's ability to use his influence on Iran may wane.
возможность номер два, я думаю, что это более вероятная возможность, это что Иран просто будет вынужден приходить и изменять то, что вот они всегда говорили, что они вынуждены вырабатывать эти ядерные оружия. Это, я думаю, тоже изменится, потому что опять они потеряли почти все свое армейское лидерство. И не только они потеряли еще я думаю, уже несколько сотен из своих ракет. И я напомню зрителям, что у Ирана всего лишь было 2000 плюс или минус баллистических ракет. И они уже потеряли из этих ракет, я думаю, несколько сотен. Значит, я думаю, очень скоро эта ситуация изменится. И даже тут путиновская возможность использовать свое влияние с Ираном испарится.
Uriel, thank you so much for this important and interesting conversation. Let me remind you that today we have with us Uriel Epstein, Executive Director of Democracy Initiative. Dear friends, thank you for watching. Write your thoughts and comments under this video. We see and read everything. See you all later. Have a peaceful continuation of your day. Thank you, Uriel. Thank you. Goodbye.
До встречи. Спокойного продолжения этого дня. Спасибо вам, Урель.
Спасибо вам. До свидания.
До свидания.